The familiar routine of my daily life had always brought me comfort and stability. Until that fateful day when everything changed. It had started like any other afternoon. The relentless drone of my trigonometry lectures had left my mind feeling stuffed, so I looked forward to unwinding after a long day of school. I sped through my chores, rushing to complete my chemistry lab report before dinner. After a hectic week of exams and college applications, the upcoming Thanksgiving break couldn't come soon enough. My family always made the holidays special, gathering around our festively decorated dining table to count our blessings. This year, I wanted to contribute more than just dessert to our feast. With meal preparations in full swing, I volunteered to pick up the last few ingredients my mom needed for her pumpkin pie filling. "Don't forget the nutmeg," she reminded me as I rushed out the door, already running late thanks to dawdling over my notes. As I backed my rusty Toyota out of the driveway, fat flakes of snow began drifting down from heavy gray skies, a sure sign that winter was fast approaching in our small Massachusetts town. Wintry weather always slowed traffic to a crawl, and today was no exception. By the time I arrived at the bustling supermarket, the parking lot was packed with procrastinating last-minute shoppers like myself. After what felt like hours navigating the jammed aisles, I finally managed to check out with everything on my list. Darkness had fallen during my supermarket excursion, and snow was falling more thickly by the minute, coating the roads in a treacherous white blanket. I took extra care navigating the slippery conditions as I headed home, flicking the windshield wipers to their most rapid setting against the worsening snowstorm. That's when I noticed a hulking dark sedan pulling out behind me, tailgating much too close for comfort on the snows. Lick roads. My nerves were already frayed from the busy day, and the aggressive driver was pushing me over the edge. As I sped up, so did they. No matter how fast I went, they stayed stubbornly on my rear bumper. I became overwhelmed by a rising sense of panic. There was hardly any other traffic on the road to use as a buffer. Gripping the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles turned white. I prayed for them to pass me already so I could be on my way. But they continued shadowing my every move, clinging to my back bumper like a grim shadow. My heart began pounding harder with each passing mile, and I found it difficult to catch my breath. Finally, my neighborhood came into view. I was almost home, safety within reach. I resisted the urge to gun the engine and floor it the rest of the way, knowing the slippery conditions meant that was a recipe for disaster. Just a few more blocks and this nightmare drive would be over. As I swung into my driveway and hit the brakes, the sedan glided smoothly past without indicating, as if they had been following me all along, merely by chance. I sat in my vehicle, gripping the wheel, shaking uncontrollably as adrenaline coursed through my veins. Something about the ominous sedan and its faceless driver had unsettled me to my core. But what reason could they have possibly had for shadowing me so intently all the way home on an empty road? I tried reasoning with myself that it was simply a case of getting stuck behind a slow driver in foul weather. Yet I couldn't shake the chilling sensation that I was being watched. After several deep breaths to steady my frayed nerves, I grabbed my groceries and hurried inside, double-checking that all the locks were securely fastened. My family greeted me with smiles, oblivious to the harrowing ordeal I had just endured. As much as I wanted to believe it was simply an overactive imagination, something told me this strange encounter was only the beginning, and that my sense of security in this quiet suburban neighborhood had been shattered in a way I might never regain. The next morning, an eerie sense of déjà vu crept over me as I peered through the living room curtains. Parked across the street, as if it had been waiting there all night, was the unmistakable dark sedan from yesterday. My blood ran cold at the sight of it once more as distant memories from the night before came flooding back. I watched nervously as the driver's side door creaked open and a tall, broad-shouldered man stepped out, wearing a shapeless gray coat and cap that obscured his face from view. Even from a distance, I could sense an ominous aura radiating off him that set my instincts on high alert. He prowled casually around our front yard, as if inspecting the property, reminding me of a predator sizing up its prey. every muscle in my body tensed with flight or fight response, kicking in. Who was this ominous stranger invading the sanctity of our home? What did he want from us? My mind raced with panicked questions as I tracked his movements with growing unease. With methodical slowness, he seemed to scrutinize every blade of grass, shrub, and fixture, as if committing our address to memory for some sinister purpose I couldn't begin to fathom. When he glanced up at our home, I instinctively shrank back deeper behind the curtains, despite knowing he couldn't see me watching him from inside. Should I call out to confront him, run and lock myself in the bathroom, scream at the top of my lungs for help? My family was still sleeping peacefully, oblivious to the unfolding drama playing out right before my eyes. I didn't want to wake them unnecessarily if it turned out to be nothing. Yet deep down, I knew with gut-wrenching certainty that this was no random coincidence. This man had followed me home, and now he was lurking outside my door, sending my instincts into overdrive with a nameless terror I couldn't escape from, even inside the safety of my own home. After what felt like an eternity of prowling the perimeter, he slowly retreated back to the ominous sedan, as if satisfied with whatever information he had gleaned from his intrusive observations. My bones turned to jelly in relief that the immediate threat seemed to be gone, yet my mind was still swirling with unanswered questions that refused to abate. On trembling legs, I retreated to the kitchen to brew a strong pot of coffee with shaking hands, hoping the caffeine jolt might shore up my frayed nerves. As the percolator started gurgling with steaming liquid, my family began rousing from their slumber one by one, drawn by the intoxicating aroma wafting through the cozy farmhouse. Dad staggered in bleary-eyed, wrapping me in a sleepy goodbye hug before heading off to the barn for morning chores, as per his daily schedule. If only he knew the nightmare that had transpired right under his unsuspecting nose while he snored the sleep of the innocent. I struggled to hold it together, calmly pouring mugs of coffee while replaying the disturbing events on endless loop in my mind. How could I report what I witnessed to my family without alarming or embarrassing myself with outlandish claims? By the time Mom wandered in fresh-faced and cheerful, I had worked myself into such a state I could no longer contain the eruption brewing inside me, desperately needing an outlet. "You're not going to believe what I saw this morning," I blurted out in a rush, the words tumbling over each other in my haste to unburden the terrifying secret I'd been silently shouldering alone. Mom gazed at me with concern as I recounted with quivering voice the sinister lurking figure prowling our yard, as if sizing us up for slaughter. Her expression shifted from puzzlement to disbelief the wilder my tale became, until finally settling into gentle dismissal. "Oh, Sammy, I'm sure it was just a neighbor being neighborly. This is a small town after all. People look out for each other." She patted my shoulder consolingly, as if soothing a child overcome by imaginary monsters under the bed. "You've had a stressful week. You're probably just overtired. Why don't you take the day to rest, and I'll bring you some warm soup later, all right?" I knew from her patronizing tone the discussion was over before it began, my claim too outrageous to merit further consideration. Yet I couldn't shake the icy prickle between my shoulder blades, insisting that this was no mere specter conjured by an overactive imagination. Something sinister had targeted our household, and I was determined to uncover why before it was too late, and my family paid the price for discounting the very real danger lurking in our midst. With Mom bustling off to prepare breakfast, I stormed upstairs, choking back tears of frustration. Locking myself in my bedroom, I paced relentlessly, plotting my next course of action. This stranger had violated my sense of safety, and I refused to be rendered helpless any longer. It was time I took matters into my own hands to solve this disturbing mystery before it escalated from disturbing sightings to something even more sinister and unthinkable. I had to find out who this prowler was and confront them directly, while also proving to my family the very real threat they stubbornly refused to acknowledge was indeed no figment of my overwrought imagination. Going downstairs, I booted up my laptop with newfound resolve coursing through me, preparing to unleash my detective skills that had, up until now, been reserved solely for true crime documentaries. A quick search of our local community forums turned up nothing out of the ordinary, so I widened my search parameters, hoping for any clue buried among mundane online musings. After hours of combing through pages of suburban minutia, a glint of insight caught my eye that sent a chill down my spine. Could it be? Was the break I needed to crack this disturbing case wide open at last? That evening, over a tense family dinner, I recounted my unsettling online discovery. All eyes were glued to me now with rapt attention, as my discovery had stirred something visceral in all of us, shaking our complacency to the core. I laid out the connections I had pieced together, practically trembling with fearful anticipation as the full scope of what we were dealing with became chillingly clear at last. In the heavy silence that followed, I watched the blood drain from my parents' faces as horrified understanding dawned. Our family was in imminent danger from a deadly predator hiding in plain sight, and it was up to me to summon the courage to face him head-on before he made his next move to claim yet another innocent life in our once idyllic small town. The time had come to stop cowering in fear and take the fight to the enemy threatening to destroy everything we held dear. I steeled my nerves, knowing our only chance of survival depended on me confronting this sinister foe and ending his reign of terror, once and for all, before it was too late for us all. After a fitful night tossing and turning with adrenaline still coursing through my veins, the sun rose on a new day of reckoning. My terrifying discoveries had stirred my family into action at last. Yet now faced with the cold light of dawn, doubts began creeping back in like grasping shadows, threatening to pull me under. What if I was wrong? What if in pulling back the veil, I had unwittingly put us all directly in the path of real danger from a killer with nothing left to lose? Cold sweat broke out at the thought of confronting this menacing stranger alone with only my family's safety as motivation. Yet I knew with sick certainty that he'd already chosen us as his next targets, and it was only a matter of time before he made his move. The element of surprise may be our only chance of stopping him before it was too late. I steeled my resolve, running through the confrontation scenario I had meticulously planned every excruciating detail of. Safety in numbers. I insisted, rallying my family's support for backup nearby out of sight. Dad's gruff voice cracked with emotion as he gripped me tight, finally acknowledging the depth of the peril I had uncovered. "Whatever happens, just run and we'll be right behind you," he reassured, pressing his hunting knife into my palm for protection. Its comforting weight grounded me as I slipped it into my pocket, finding resolve in its icy reassurance. After a hasty breakfast none of us could stomach more than a few bites of, we piled into the truck, following my directions to the secluded Coolde. Sack, my online sleuthing, had uncovered. As we pulled up to the dilapidated ranch house at the end of the lonely dead-end street, dread pooled cold and viscous in my gut. But it was too late to turn back now. This confrontation had been set in motion the moment that Sinister's sedan first materialized in our neighborhood. I approached the peeling front door, my family hovering anxiously nearby, prepared to swoop in at the first sign of trouble. Taking a deep, steadying breath, I pounded my fist determinedly against the faded wood, doing my best to project an inner calmness I was anything but feeling. For an eternity, nothing but deafening silence responded until finally, faint shuffling movement approached from within, like the shuffling of dead leaves. The tarnished brass doorknob creaked ominously as it twisted open, revealing a hulking, disheveled figure silhouetted against the gloomy interior behind. A shiver coursed through me as cold, unblinking eyes peered down at my petite frame, taking sick pleasure in intimidating his latest prey. Yet this time, I refused to show fear and back down. My family's survival depended on me facing this predator down without flinching, so I summoned every ounce of resolve within me. "We need to talk," I announced firmly. while angling my body to occlude the view behind me, blocking his line of sight to where my family anxiously watched from the truck. A chilling smirk spread slowly across his bloated face. Unaccustomed to being confronted so boldly on his own turf. "Oh, is that so? Well, come on in then, little girl. I've got all the time in the world," he leered, standing aside to usher me threateningly into his lair. As I took a single reluctant step across the threshold, the acrid stench of stale body odor and old whiskey assaulted my senses, causing my stomach to roil dangerously. Fighting back the urge to bolt, I held my ground, staring fearlessly up into his beady eyes. "I know what you've been doing. Prowling around my neighborhood and terrifying my family," I challenged, not breaking eye contact, despite how much I wanted to recoil from his vile presence. A dark look passed over his ruddy features as his facade dropped. The predatory instincts I'd seen simmering just below the surface, now raging forth unrestrained. "Who do you think you are, coming here, making demands and accusations? You've got fire, girl, I'll give you that. Too bad it'll have to be put out. Permanently," he growled, launching towards me with lightning speed, meaty hands outstretched to silence me forever. Reflexively, I recoiled, my palm finding the comforting hilt of Dad's hunting knife, as adrenaline surged through my veins with preternatural clarity. In that single heartbeat, time seemed to slow to a crawl, my instincts taking over where rational thought failed. With a wordless battle cry, I swung my arm in a wide arc, meeting no resistance as the blade slid cleanly through rotten flesh. A sickening, squelching sound and spray of warm fluid met my assault, followed by an anguished howl that curdled my blood and sent my family charging to my rescue. Before I could register what had just transpired, strong arms gripped me, dragging me sharply away from the grisly scene inside as burbling screams echoed behind us. Dad yanked open the truck door, thrusting me inside before turning back to finish what I had started, leaving a trail of scarlet droplets in our wake. As we sped away down the lonely lane, I dared a final look back to see savage figures silhouetted against the fading light, putting an end to the threat that had plagued our family's happiness for far too long. In the deafening silence that followed our escape, shock slowly gave way to a hollow numbness that not even the warmth of my mother's embrace could penetrate. Dark stains would probably never wash fully from my hands, no matter how hard I scrubbed, a visible reminder of the jagged line crossed today that could never be uncrossed. As the sun finally began to sink below the tree line bathing the countryside in morning orange, I stared vacantly out the window, wondering how I could ever return to anything resembling normalcy after the ordeal that had permanently burned itself into my soul. My family survived through my intervention this time. Yet how many more battles lay ahead before I could finally put this nightmare truly behind me? In the days that followed the fateful confrontation, I existed in a numb fog, going through the motions of daily life on autopilot, while the lingering trauma played on endless loop inside my head. The reality of what I had done sunk in with deeper horror each time I replayed that split-second decision that could never be taken back. No charges were filed against my family in the end, with the authorities ruling it an act of self-defense, given the man's long rap sheet of violent crimes. Yet the law provided little solace. I would have to live with bearing the weight of ending another human life on my conscience for the rest of my days. However much of a monster he was, sleep only came in fitful bursts, haunted by crimson-soaked nightmares. I desperately tried washing away each dawn with scalding showers that offered no cleansing. My parents watched helplessly as I withdrew further into my trembling shell day by day, the stress taking a physical toll that was worryingly apparent. Dark circles ringed my sunken eyes, and I had lost weight I couldn't afford to lose, barely touching any food that passed my ashen lips. Nothing could erase the gruesome memories seared permanently into my psyche, or so I believed at my lowest ebb. One dreary Thursday afternoon, I heard a tentative knock at the door and dragged myself downstairs in a daze to find a familiar face waiting patiently on our porch. Mr. Wilson, my favorite history teacher, greeted me with kind eyes full of care and understanding beyond his years. He had stopped by to check on me, concerned for my well-being after my prolonged absence from school. In his gentle company, the dam holding back my anguish finally broke, torrents of tears flooding forth as I recounted the harrowing ordeal in a choked whisper between heaving sobs. To my surprise, he listened without judgment, letting me unload the unbearable burden I had been shouldering alone for far too long in destructive silence. His calming presence soothed frayed nerves, as no amount of empty platitudes from well-meaning friends and family ever could. After I had cried myself hoarse, Mr. Wilson offered sage words of wisdom that began to lift the oppressive fog clouding my mind. What you endured was horrific, but you survived, and, not just physically, your strength and bravery saved lives. Now it's time to channel all that courage inward to heal. The past can't be changed. The past can't be changed, so focus on the present and future within your control. Dark times don't last, but people who get through them do. You have so much wonderful potential ahead of you still. His affirmation began to loosen the clawed grip of guilt and regret, allowing glimpses of a future beyond this ordeal to peek through cracks in my despair for the first time. When he left with a promise to check in, the dark clouds hanging over me had noticeably lightened their oppressive weight. I found renewed purpose, pouring through missing assignment work and old class notes in preparation to return to some semblance of normal routine again soon. In combing through lesson materials to catch up, something Mr. Wilson said that afternoon sparked an epiphany that jolted me from my lethargy with a renewed surge of energy. I had been so caught up in the aftermath that I never fully analyzed the details leading up to that fateful confrontation. What was the real motivation and bigger picture behind this man targeting my family? There had to be deeper connections and a larger thread worth untangling. Fired up with renewed purpose, I dove headfirst into piecing together the murky clues with a coldly objective investigator's eye. This time, rather than jumping to conclusions as emotion clouded my judgment before, sifting methodically through records, both public and confidential sources helped prise open. A dark underbelly festering below the suburban veneer gradually came into clear focus. Chilling links between unsolved cases and familiar names, cropping up again and again, hinted at a widespread criminal syndicate, preying upon our vulnerability as easy targets under their radar. Could it be? A sudden frenzy gripped me as pieces snapped rapidly together, revealing a depraved criminal element that had grown fat and bold in our midst off the blood and suffering of innocents like us. My family and I had come very close to becoming just another nameless statistic in their ongoing reign of terror. But no more. This was bigger than just us now. It was about dismantling an entire corrupt system preying upon the vulnerable with impunity for far too long, right under everyone's nose. I had endured the flames and emerged steelier, carrying battle scars that fueled my resolve to see this insidious machine of evil grinding to a halt, once and for all, with or without the help of a justice system that had long turned a blind eye. It was time I took the fight directly to the enemy on their own turf, armed only with the bitter truth as my most powerful weapon. One way or another, this was ending tonight by my hand. Come what may. It was time to dismantle this criminal empire brick by sinister brick, and I knew exactly where to start.